Michael never imagined the night would change his life. He was just another worn-out accountant staring at numbers beneath the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. The office was nearly empty, the kind of silence that made the ticking clock louder than his own thoughts. He had been preparing to shut down his computer when he noticed someone approaching. It was Mr. Harris, the man everyone respected and feared in equal measure. His sharp suit, steady voice, and cold eyes made him the type of boss who gave orders rather than asked favors. "Michael," Mr. Harris said. Pausing at his desk, his tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, as if even a simple request was still a command. "I need your help tonight." Michael straightened in his chair, hiding the fatigue in his eyes. "Of course, sir. What do you need?" "My wife isn't feeling well," Mr. Harris explained, adjusting his cufflinks as though the detail of his sleeves mattered more than his words. "She came with me to a dinner meeting, but I can't leave right now. Drive her home for me. She'll be waiting by the lobby." The words hit Michael with unexpected weight. He had met Emily Harris a few times at company parties. She was always polite, her smile gentle but distant. Like a beautiful painting behind glass, admired but never touched, she carried herself with a kind of grace that made everyone pay attention without her ever asking for it. Michael had noticed her, though he never admitted it, not even to himself. "Of course," Michael said quickly, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'll take her home." Mr. Harris gave a short nod, the kind that ended conversations. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Michael with a strange mix of nervousness and curiosity. Grabbing his jacket, Michael hurried down to the lobby. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the nearly empty building. He felt his palms dampen, and he wasn't sure why. This was just a favor, he told himself. Nothing more. But as he reached the lobby, the sight of her made that thought feel small. Emily was sitting on a sleek leather chair, one leg crossed neatly over the other. She wore a pale blue dress that softened the sharp edges of the modern space around her. Her hair fell gracefully over her shoulders, catching the glow of the chandelier above. She wasn't scrolling through her phone or checking the time. She just sat there, calm as though she had been waiting not just for a ride, but for something else entirely. When she saw him, her lips curved into a faint smile. "You must be Michael," she said, her voice warm but tired. "Yes, Mrs. Harris," he replied, then immediately regretted the formality. Sounded stiff. She tilted her head, studying him with eyes that seemed to notice more than he wanted to reveal. "Emily," she corrected softly. "Just Emily." He nodded, opening the glass doors for her as they stepped outside into the cool night air. The parking lot was quiet, the hum of distant traffic the only sound. Michael led her to his car, suddenly aware of how ordinary it looked compared to the luxury vehicles her husband usually drove. But Emily didn't hesitate. She slid into the passenger seat with elegance, as though even the simplest actions carried meaning when she did them. Michael started the engine, and the silence between them filled the car like a fragile glass wall. He gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Thank you for driving me," she said after a moment, her voice low. "It's no problem," Michael replied, trying to sound casual. "Your husband asked." And Welly was glad to help. Her lips pressed into a thin smile. "He's always asking others to do what he doesn't have time for." The way she said it wasn't bitter, but it wasn't light either. Lingered in the air, a quiet truth she hadn't meant to share. Michael didn't know how to respond, so he kept his eyes on the road, his heart pounding harder than it chilled. The city stretched before them, street lights flickering past, each one painting her face in fragments of light and shadow. Michael stole a glance, catching the way her expression shifted between calm and something deeper, something almost sorrowful. She looked like a woman carrying a weight no one else could see. The silence grew heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was charged like the pause before a storm. Michael felt it, though he didn't fully understand it. He had agreed to a simple favor. Yet, with every passing minute, it felt like more than that as they drove farther. Emily turned slightly toward him, her eyes fixed on the blurred lights rushing by outside the window. "You're very quiet," she said softly. "I guess I am. I don't want to say the wrong thing." Her lips curved, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Sometimes silence says more than words. Her tone was gentle, but it left Michael with a question he didn't dare ask. What was she really saying? The night stretched on, the distance to her home shrinking with every turn of the wheel. Yet Michael felt as though the journey had already pulled him into something far greater than he expected. This wasn't just a favor. It wasn't just a ride. It was the beginning of a story he wasn't ready for, but one he could no longer avoid. Isk. The car rolled forward, the hum of the engine filling the silence between them. Michael kept his hands firm on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road, but his mind was restless. He could feel Emily's presence beside him, not loud or demanding, but heavy in a way that made the small space inside the car feel tighter than it was. Streetlights washed over her face, each flash of light revealing a new shade of her expression. 1 second distant, the next almost lost. Michael stole a glance and quickly looked away, afraid of being caught staring. He tried to focus on the road, but the quiet felt too loud, and his chest tightened with every passing mile. Emily was the one who finally broke it. Her voice was soft, low, but it slipped into the silence like a ripple in still water. "You're very quiet, Michael." Her words startled him. He gripped the wheel harder, forcing a small laugh. "I guess I am. I don't want to say the wrong thing." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes fixed on the window where the city lights blurred like falling stars. "Sometimes silence says more than words," she whispered, almost as if speaking to herself. Her tone made his heart stumble. What was she really saying? Was it just a passing comment, or was there something beneath it? He wanted to ask, but the weight of her voice stopped him. Instead, he let the silence return, though now it felt different, charged, fragile, alive. The car passed through quiet neighborhoods, houses glowing with warm lights, families gathered behind closed curtains. Emily's gaze lingered on them, her expression unreadable. Michael noticed how her shoulders sank slightly, as if the sight of other people's simple lives stirred something inside her. "Do you ever feel," Shu said suddenly, breaking into his thoughts like you're part of a world, but not really? In it, Michael blinked, unsure if she expected an answer. He swallowed, his throat dry. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I guess it happens when life doesn't match what you thought it would be." Emily turned her face toward him then, her eyes shining faintly in the passing light. "Exactly," Stutch smiled faintly. But it was a smile that carried no joy, only recognition. "You understand more than most." Her words unsettled him. How could she know that? He wanted to ask, but instead he pressed his lips together, afraid of saying too much. The road stretched on, but the air inside the car thickened with unspoken things. Michael could sense it. The way her voice wavered, the way she seemed to be holding something back, as though every word she chose was a battle between what she wanted to say and what she shouldn't. "Could you?" Emily's voice trailed off before she finished. She looked down at her hands, fingers entwined tightly in her lap. Then she looked back up, her voice steadier this time. "Could you take the longer way home? I need a little more time." Michael nodded without hesitation, though his heart skipped at the request. He changed lanes, guiding the car onto a route that curved away from her neighborhood. The city fell behind them, replaced by quieter roads lined with trees and darkened houses. The stillness outside mirrored the storm he felt inside. Emily leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes briefly, as if the night air through the window was the only thing keeping her grounded. When she spoke again, her voice carried the faintest tremor. "Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing, like no one really sees me anymore." Michael's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her that he saw her. He had always seen her, even from a distance, but he bit back the words, afraid they would sound too bold, too dangerous. Instead, he said carefully, "I think people see you more than you realize." Her eyes opened and she looked at him, studying his face in the dim glow of the dashboard. "Lights, do you?" she asked quietly. Michael's grip on the wheel tightened. He felt heat rise in his chest, in his throat, but he didn't look away. "Yes," he said simply. "I do." Her lips parted slightly as though his answer surprised her. She turned back to the window, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Yet the silence no longer felt empty, was full of something they couldn't name. Asterisk. The car curved along a quiet stretch of road where the city lights gave way to open space. The sky stretched wide and dark above them, scattered with faint stars. Emily drew in a slow breath, her voice almost a sigh. "You know, Michael, it's strange. I've been married for years, but I can't remember the last time I felt truly heard." Michael's heart sank. He wanted to reach for her hand to offer something, comfort, understanding, anything. But his own restraint held him back. He stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air, afraid that if he spoke, the moment would shatter. The ride stretched on, each minute longer than the last, each second pulling them closer to something neither had planned. Michael could feel it's a fragile thread forming between them, a quiet understanding, a dangerous closeness. And yet he knew this was only the beginning. Something unspoken had started in that silence, something that would not end when the car stopped. Asterisk. The city lights faded behind them as Michael steered down the quieter streets. He thought Emily would soon ask him to head straight home, but instead her voice came low, almost hesitant. "Could you take the long way?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Michael glanced at her quickly. "The long way?" "Yes," she said, firmer this time. "I don't want to go home just yet. I need some air." He didn't argue. He simply nodded and took the next turn, guiding the car away from the direct route. His heart beat faster, not because of the drive, but because of what her request meant. She didn't want to go home, not to her house, not to her husband. The car moved through quiet neighborhoods, then toward the open roads where trees bent toward the sky. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was waiting, like it knew something important was about to be spoken. Emily leaned her head slightly against the window, her reflection flickering in the glass. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, without looking at him, she whispered, "Do you know what it feels like to live in a house full of everything, but feel like you own nothing?" The question hit Michael in a way he couldn't explain. He gripped the wheel tighter, unsure if she wanted him to answer. "I'm not sure," he said carefully, "but it sounds lonely." Her lips curved into a bitter smile, though her eyes stayed fixed outside. "It is. Everyone thinks we have the perfect life. Big house, nice cars, the kind of marriage people envy. But the truth is," her voice trailed, trembling before she caught it again. "The truth is, a house doesn't mean a home, and a marriage doesn't always mean love." Michael's chest tightened. He had heard rumors about his boss, about his temper, his endless hours at work, but never had he imagined the cost it might have taken on the woman beside him. Seeing her now, her face softened by sadness, made the rumors feel painfully real. Emily turned slightly, her eyes finding him in the dim glow of the dashboard. "You're loyal to him. I know that. He respects you. But Michael," she paused, searching his face. "When you look at me, why does it feel different?" Her words almost made him lose his breath. He hadn't realized she noticed, he thought. His stolen glances, his careful distance, had kept his admiration hidden, but she had seen. She had always seen. He struggled for words. His throat tightened. "I don't know. Maybe because I see more than what people pretend to see." Emily's gaze lingered on him, sharp yet vulnerable. "And what do you see?" Michael hesitated, every part of him warning not to cross the line. But the truth pushed its way out, low and unshakable. "I see a woman who deserves to be more than just someone's wife. I see someone who deserves to be seen." Her breath caught, and for a moment she looked away as if his words were too much, too honest. Her fingers tightened in her lap, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked slightly. "Do you know what it's like to be invisible in your own life? To sit across from someone who once swore they loved you, only to realize you're just another part of their schedule?" Michael's jaw clenched. He didn't answer, because no answer felt enough. He knew what it was like to feel small, overlooked. But not like that. Not the way she described. Emily laughed softly, though there was no joy in it. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had chosen differently. If I had married for love instead of comfort. If I had listened to my heart instead of everyone else's advice." She shook her head, her eyes glistening. "But I can't change the past. I can only live in the silence it left behind." The weight of her confession settled over him. Michael wanted to say something, anything that would ease the ache in her voice. But he also knew words could only reach so far. Instead, he slowed the car as they reached a small overlook above the city. The view stretched wide, the skyline glowing against the night sky. Emily's eyes softened as she looked out. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," Michael said, but his eyes were on her, not the city. She noticed, breath quickened, though she didn't turn away. Instead, she held his gaze for a heartbeat too long before finally looking back out the window. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she said quietly. "How am I looking at you?" he asked, his voice low. "Like I'm not married," she whispered. Her words cut the air like glass, sharp and fragile. Michael's pulse raced. He wanted to defend himself, to claim innocence, but he couldn't, because she was right. He had been looking at her with something he had no right to feel. The silence that followed was heavier than before. But it wasn't empty. It was full of truth, raw and unguarded. For the first time, Michael realized they were standing at the edge of something neither of them had planned. Something neither of them could step away from isolely. The crack had formed, the kind that could never be sealed again, and Michael knew with a certainty that shook him that nothing about his life or hers would ever be the same. Asterisk. The car idled at the overlook. The hum of the engine softened against the wide silence of the night. From where they sat, the city stretched below like a field of scattered stars, each light flickering with a life of its own. Michael had stopped here without thinking, but now he realized it was the kind of place people came to confess things they couldn't say anywhere else. Emily leaned back in her seat. Her arms folded lightly, though her body seemed heavy with something she had carried too long. Her eyes were on the skyline, but her voice was far away when she finally spoke. "Do you know what it feels like when the person you share your life with doesn't see you anymore? Not as a woman, not as a person, just part of the furniture." Michael's chest tightened. He had expected her sadness, but not this kind of raw truth. He swallowed hard, keeping his hands steady on the wheel, even though the car wasn't moving. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she continued, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. "But sometimes silence eats you alive, and I'm so tired of being quiet." He turned his head slightly, watching her profile in the dim light. She looked beautiful, but not in the perfect, distant way he had always imagined. She looked real, vulnerable, her edges sharp with honesty. It was the kind of beauty that hurt to look at. Emily, his voice broke, and he had to steady it before he spoke again. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, she whispered. Then, after a pause, she turned toward him, her eyes glistening in the glow from the dashboard. But tell me this. When you look at me, Michael, why does it feel different? The question cut through him. He wanted to deny it, to claim innocence. But the truth was already there, alive in the air between them. His heartbeat thundered in his chest as he forced himself to answer. Because I don't just see you. I see the person behind all of it. The person you're trying so hard to hide. Her lips parted slightly as though his words had touched something fragile inside her. For a moment she didn't move, then she leaned back again, her hand brushing against her forehead. You shouldn't say that. You shouldn't even think it. But it's true, Michael said, his voice firmer now, and I think you know it too. Emily's eyes closed, and for a long moment she didn't respond. The silence reacted, growing heavy and unrelenting. Finally, she exhaled shakily. Do you know the last time my husband asked me how I was feeling, or noticed when I was hurting? I can't even remember. To him, I'm just part of the life he built. Convenient. Predictable. Her voice caught, and she shook her head. And I let it happen. I told myself it was enough. But lately I wonder if I made a mistake. Michael's throat tightened. He wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her she deserved more, but he forced himself to stay still. The lines were too thin, too dangerous. You didn't make a mistake, he said softly. You just lost yourself along the way. That doesn't mean you can't find who you are again. Her eyes opened, and she looked at him with a mix of pain and wonder. And what if it's too late? It's never too late, he said, his voice low but steady. Not as long as you're still here, still hoping for more. Her lips trembled, and she looked away quickly, staring out at the glowing city as though it could give her answers. The silence between them grew again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was alive with all the things neither dared to say. Finally, Emily spoke again, her tone sharper, more fragile. Do you realize what you're doing, Michael? You're making me feel things I thought were gone. I don't know if I should hate you for that or thank you. The words sent a shiver through him. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, afraid of saying something that couldn't be taken back. Instead, he whispered, maybe you don't need to decide yet. Her gaze snapped back to him, and for a long, breathless moment, they simply stared at each other. His heart pounded as though it might break free from his chest. He could see it in her eyes, too, that longing she was fighting so hard to resist. Emily's hands shifted just slightly, brushing against the space between them. Michael felt the warmth of it, though she never touched him fully. She hesitated, hovering there as if the smallest movement could change everything. Then slowly she pulled her hand back, her eyes closing for a moment. This is wrong, she whispered, her voice breaking. We can't. Michael's pulse hammered, but he nodded, forcing himself to breathe. I know. His voice cracked heavy with the truth. But that doesn't make it any less real. Her eyes flew open at his words, and she looked at him as if she saw him for the very first time. And in that gaze, Michael understood something. She wasn't angry at him. She wasn't even angry at herself. Chu was angry at the life she had been forced to settle for. The cage she had convinced herself was love. The night pressed in around them, the city lights flickering below like fading stars. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke, but both knew that something had shifted, something that couldn't be undone. For the first time, the truth was out in the open, dangerous, undeniable, alive, and Michael realized with a trembling certainty that whatever happened next, he was already too deep to walk away. The night felt endless as Michael sat beside Emily, the engine running low and steady. Neither of them moved. The city below sparkled, but inside the car, the air was thick, filled with something he couldn't name. Emily's breathing was uneven, as though she was holding back more than words. Michael's chest ached with the urge to say something that would ease her pain, but nothing seemed enough. She finally broke the silence, her voice raw. Do you know what's strange, Michael? It's right here. Just talking to you feels more real than anything I've had in years. He turned his head toward her, his throat dry. Emily, no. Let me finish, she whispered, her eyes steady though wet with unshed tears. I've been living in a house full of walls so thick I started to believe I didn't matter anymore. But tonight, she paused, her lips trembling into a faint smile. Tonight, I feel alive. I feel seen. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had no right to feel proud of that, but he did. His voice was low. Careful, because you do matter more than you realize. She let out a shaky laugh. Do you know I can't even remember the last time someone told me that? I can't remember the last time someone really looked at me like I was more than just his wife. Michael wanted to say what he had always thought, that he had noticed her from the first moment, Not because she was beautiful, but because her eyes carried stories she couldn't tell. Instead, he said, "I've seen you all along, even when you thought no one did." Her eyes flicked toward him, sharp and vulnerable at once. She studied his face as if testing whether his words were true. The intensity of her gaze made his heart race. But he didn't look away. "You're different," she whispered almost to herself. "You don't even realize it, do you? The way you listen, the way you notice." Michael's pulse thudded in his ears. He wanted to tell her that he noticed everything, every tilt of her head, every small sigh, every moment her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. But he bit it back. He couldn't risk saying too much. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with longing. Emily leaned back against the seat, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her dress. "I shouldn't be saying these things to you," she admitted, her voice breaking. "You work for him. You're supposed to be loyal." "I am loyal," Michael said quickly, though even he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. "But loyalty doesn't mean I can ignore the truth." Her brows lifted, her expression torn between surprise and fear. "And what truth is that?" "That you're not invisible," he said softly. "Not to me." Emily's lips parted, but no words came out. "Kay." As she turned her face toward the window, blinking fast, as if the lights of the city could steady her. When she finally spoke, her voice was fragile. "You have no idea how much it means to hear that." Michael exhaled slowly, his hands still gripping the steering wheel, though they weren't moving. He wished he could say more, do more. But the line between them was too sharp, too dangerous. For a while, they just sat there, the silence speaking for them. Then Emily shifted slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to go home yet." Michael's heart skipped. "Where do you want to go?" "Nowhere," she said quickly. "Just here. Just stay here with me for a little longer." So they stayed. The minutes stretched into something timeless. Every glance between them carried a weight. Every breath felt louder than it should. At one point, her hand moved closer to his on the center console, almost brushing against him. Michael felt the heat of it. A closeness that made his whole body tense. He didn't dare move, didn't dare break the fragile balance between them. "Michael," she whispered suddenly, her voice shaking. "I don't know what's happening to me. I shouldn't feel this way. But with you, I remember who I used to be. I remember what it feels like to want something again." His throat tightened. He forced himself to breathe, to speak slowly. "Maybe that's not wrong. Maybe it just means you're still alive inside. And that's not something to be ashamed of." Her eyes found his again, wide and uncertain. For a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. The city, her husband, the rules they both knew they were breaking just by sitting there. All that existed was the fragile, dangerous pole between them. The space narrowed almost without them realizing. She leaned in slightly, not enough to cross the line, but enough that he could feel her breath against his skin. His body screamed to close the distance, to give in to what every part of him wanted. But his mind held him back at the last moment. She pulled away, her head bowing as if weighed down by invisible chains. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. "I want to, but I can't." Michael closed his eyes, his hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping him steady. "I know," he whispered back. "I know." Emily drew in a trembling breath and leaned against the seat again. A tear slipped down her cheek, catching in the faint glow from the dashboard. "Thank you," she whispered suddenly. "For what?" "For reminding me I still exist." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she didn't look away. Michael felt something in his chest twist, sharp and deep. He couldn't say what he wanted to, that he saw her, that he would always see Herb, but he let her words linger in the night, unchallenged. Outside, the city lights flickered as though the world kept moving. But inside the car, time stood still. They both knew they couldn't cross the line, yet both knew they already had in ways that couldn't be undone. The silence between them was no longer fragile. It was full of everything they hadn't said. And though Michael finally turned the key and guided the car back toward her house, the truth stayed with them, burning quietly in the dark. Some confessions once spoken could never be forgotten. The drive back to Emily's house felt heavier than the entire night before. Michael kept his eyes on the road, but his mind was everywhere, on her words, on the closeness they had almost shared, on the silence that now felt too loud. Emily sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the blur of passing lights. She didn't speak, but Michael could feel her thoughts pressing against the air between them. When he finally turned into her neighborhood, his heart sank. The streets were quiet, lined with perfect houses, each one glowing with porch lights and trimmed lawns. They looked peaceful, but to him the whole street seemed like a stage, hiding truths behind closed doors. Emily's house stood at the end, large and elegant, a symbol of success to anyone who saw it. But now Michael saw it differently, like a cage with polished walls. He pulled into the driveway and parked. The engine hummed low, then quieted when he turned the key. The silence that followed was sharp, almost unbearable. Neither of them moved to open the door. Instead, they sat there breathing in the same heavy air, trapped between wanting more and fearing too much. Emily's hand shifted slightly on her lap, her fingers brushing against the edge of the seat